All right, ladies and gentlemen. So it's been, what is today? The 22nd, 23rd, May 23rd. This hive moved in on the 10th, if I remember right. Mother's Day is when I did the inspection, so it was the 9th that they actually moved in. I was talking to a buddy of mine who reminded me that I gave him the majority of all my drawn frame. And so I had to get back in here and check, and sure enough, all of this was undrawn, and this box was actually the lower box when they first moved in, so all the bees were up in the top. I flip-flopped it and moved where the drawn comb is now at the bottom, and I did that so that if anything tries to attack the hive, the main cluster is close enough to the entrance to protect it. There was 9 frames, I believe, drawn out in the one box, and so I went ahead and left this on. That was a week ago. They've drawn, I think, one middle frame, just a minuscule out, but for the most part, it still remains undrawn. And a lot of that probably has to do with the population. As I broke it open, I realized my population wasn't as big of a swarm as I originally thought it was. But so we're going to go ahead and crack this box open. I'll get you re-aimed. We're going to check for brood pattern, honey, and pollen. And we're going to go ahead and try to find that queen. Now she's hypothetically laid enough eggs. There should be some capped brood in here, along with larvae and eggs. So if in the event she does get injured in this inspection, I'll be able to tell, and they'll be able to replace her if they have to. So let's go ahead and break this open. I should probably get my smoker going. Typically don't use a smoker, but it's always nice to have burning just in case you need it.
What, does it scare them away?
No, the smoke calms them down, and it actually, if you use too much of it, it'll trigger them into a feeding frenzy. Because they're preparing for, in the event that it's a forest fire. And so they'll, in the event of a forest fire, they rob as much honey out of their own hive as possible. And Sasha, out. So that way, if they have to swarm out of there, they can, and they'll have enough. All right, so I'm just going to get the smoker going, and we're going to fill the shed here with a little bit of smoke. It also helps mask their pheromone that they use to alert the hive that they're being opened up, kind of deal. So we're just going to give them one puff, get it down across the hive. There we go. And you can come in at the bottom and also do it, but I didn't design that baseboard that well. So all I do is I leave that kind of under the bench. The smoke will slowly drift up, and that I in the hopes that it masks my CO2, just in case they get a bit testy. But all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to remove a frame that is furthest away from them, from the cluster, because hypothetically that's where they're going to be least protective of, because there's a less likelihood that there's brood on it. If there's not a cluster of bees on it, there's not going to be brood in there. It might be honey storage, it might be an empty frame, but we're going to remove that one, so then we can slide and break the different frames apart and have a little bit more space, so we're less likely to injure any of the bees as we inspect the rest of the hive. So I'm gonna wiggle that guy loose. Bryson, they'll just end up flying right past you to get out.
Yeah, they've done that a few times.
Yeah. Alright, so a little bit of drawn comb, not much, empty stuff. Other side is completely empty. So we're just going to set that off to the side. Break the next frame. And this one, depending on what's on it, depends on whether or not I'll even bother taking it out. It looks like they're starting to draw it out, but we're going to leave that in there. We now have enough space that we can break the other frames loose and inspect them. Fully drawn but empty. Fully drawn but empty. So today's weather, I believe it's 60 something degrees. Mostly sunny, so hopefully most of the bees are out and about foraging, as it's been raining for the past few days. All right, so mostly drawn. Nothing really in there. Mostly drawn. It looks like they're putting stuff in there. Yep, they're putting some nectar in there. So that means that the next one will probably be full of nectar, a little bit heavier. Put that in there without crushing anybody. Yep, they're putting some nectar in there.
Oh, wow.
And now, I don't know if you can see that on there, but you can see a little bit of a glisten. That's the fresh nectar that they've moved into the comb. And without any eggs or brood, it is very unlikely, not that it's impossible, but it's very unlikely that you're going to find the queen on a frame such as this. So when I put these frames back in, I actually hug them up to each other again. So that way when I am finished, I'm going to slide this whole deal back over, but it's not likely that another bee is going to be in those frames or in these joints and get crushed. I especially don't want that to happen to the queen, which I have done. I have injured the queen upon replacing a frame. And it ended up costing me, I did it late enough in the season that it ended up raining by the time their queen was born, their new queen was born, and she never bred, so the hive just died out. All right, we're going to take a look here. More nectar. No eggs. There we go. All nectar. Looking good. So I had that feeder on here for a week and a half, and they didn't touch it. And so I just removed it. Which I hope that means that it's a wild hive. I mean, they hypothetically should have smelt it and gone for it, but they really didn't have much interest in it. That could have been the fact that the bigger frames up top were just too much to travel. But yeah, they didn't want anything to do with that feeder. And I put it outside for a while. I thought it might be due to my sugar mix. I ended up getting hummingbirds to come and try to get some of it. I got a little bee over here in the corner. It just doesn't want to leave. There you go. Come on, bub. There we go. Well, that's quite a bit heavier. All right. So we've got some capped brood. Go ahead and open that door just a little bit so we can get a little bit more light in here. All right, so we got capped brood, larva, baby larva up top.
Was that the queen in the middle?
Yes, it is. Good eye. So let me see if I can hold this without dropping or squishing any bees. Come on, get out of the way, bud. All right, so actually, Bryson, why don't you go ahead and point to her, just in case the camera's having a hard time trying to see where she's at.
Right.
Yep,
there.
that's her right there. Like I said, once you see her, you can't unsee her. She's inspecting. Actually, we've got eggs down along the bottom frames. Sorry, my camera phone's not going to pick that up. But the way you can tell the difference between an egg and a larva is the egg actually stands straight up like a grain of rice off of the bottom of the frame, or out of the bottom of the cell, and the larva will be fallen over, and that's a hatched egg. And then it grows, and maybe in the mid frame you can see the little white curlicues. So I want to say at around 9 or 10 days, those will grow big enough to be capped. Then they'll remain in that capped brood cell for the next 13, 14 days and hatch out to make a baby bee. That'll chew her way out. So yeah, honestly, because we've seen the queen, we have a solid pattern. I mean, every cell on these frames is full of larvae. And so that's going to be the end of our inspection. We've seen the queen. She's not marked. Doesn't mean necessarily she's wild, but she is not marked. So that's a good thing. Nice caramel Italian queen. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and put that away, and our inspection is done. I assume that the rest of the frames are just as full, but there's no reason to really check. The pattern on this frame, which is the newest frame, is nice, tight, every cell full, and so there's no real reason to assume that the others aren't. All right, so now the queen was on this side, and so I hugged this frame against this one as it naturally would sit, so that way I can walk these back into position, and I know that there's no comb or anything in there that I would accidentally crush her on. And as we get closer, we'll just kind of squeeze it a little bit, about half the size of a bee. There's no buzzing, so we'll go ahead and push it the rest of the way. Push that the rest of the way. Take our partially drawn frame, put it in there. And we're good. So none of these guys seem to be walking to the edge much. So I'm going to go ahead and just puff the edges. Just to kind of hopefully steer them away from it. And I'm going to take our top box. I'm going to come in. Put it in place. Square it up. Put our spacer on. Put our top board on, inner top board, and then go ahead and place our lid in there. And there you go, folks. Cot swarm, second inspection, looks good.